Greetings and salutations, and thank you for clicking on this video. Today I'm going to show you how to add an extra hard drive to your Linux computer. This is a subject that I have covered in the past, but it's time to revisit this because I'm getting a lot of people who are asking me about this, and I think I can do it better this time. This time around I'm going to show you how to do it almost 100% graphically. People who come to Linux from other operating systems, they tend to get a little confused when it comes to storage devices because Linux handles storage devices in a much different way. It doesn't assign a drive letter to it. It doesn't automatically appear when you plug it in. And that is because of the basic nature of how Linux works. Linux was derived from Unix. It's a work-alike to the Unix operating system. Not based on it, but programmed to work just like Unix. And Unix is a system that was designed to run big computers that would fill entire rooms, that could literally have hundreds of storage devices hooked up. Anything from big reel-to-reel tape drives to hard drives the size of washing machines. And we have that same functionality today in a modern Linux desktop or laptop computer. Now, that can present a challenge because it is different, but it also opens up a lot of options. So we're going to take a long leisurely stroll through this process today, and I'm going to try and tell you how to avoid the pitfalls that you might run into as you go through this process, and also show you some of the different options that you have for how you actually utilize this new storage device you put in the machine. So we're going to use a virtual machine today to do this, but the procedure is exactly the same on real hardware. It does not change. It's just easier to do it on a virtual machine because we can pretty much manipulate it any way we like, right? So we'll go to settings and we're going to look at storage, and the first thing that we're going to do is add a hard drive. And it's so simple to do in a virtual machine. Just add hard disk. And we will create a new drive to do this. And dynamically allocated is fine. I don't care how big we want to make it. Well, this is a virtual machine, so we kind of deal in smaller numbers here. So let's make this like 100 megabytes. What is that, 320? Doesn't matter. Okay, so we have created a drive, and I just left it at the name there for new hard drive because this is only for VirtualBox. This name will not appear in anything that has to do with the operating system. Alright, so we have our drive, and the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to stick a bootable live Linux DVD or USB stick in. This would be the same thing that you use to install Linux. And I think what we'll do is we're going to do it with Ubuntu GNOME just for fun. So now we have our storage all figured out there. So if this was a real machine, I would have taken the case apart, I would have put the new drive in, plugged it all in, and then closed it back up, and then stuck a USB stick in there that will boot it off of a live Linux environment. You can do this from within the installed system. You will have to install some software to do that, but it's just easier just to boot off of a different system like a live disk to do it. Okay, so now we have that, so we'll go ahead and we will start up our machine. And it is loading the live image of Ubuntu GNOME. Even though this is a Linux Mint machine, it's perfectly fine. Any live image will do. Most distributions of Linux that have some sort of live environment that you can boot into, they will have the tools that you need installed in that live environment. Not necessarily once the system gets installed, though. Alright, so we are going to try Ubuntu. Now your particular live disk may go straight to a desktop, or you may get some different stuff here, but this is how it works if you're doing something in Ubuntu. And it's going to dump us out to a live desktop. No, we don't need to do that. We can close that. And we go to Activities, And the program that we need is gparted. So we can get our new disk all formatted up and ready to rock and roll. So when gparted opens up, you're going to see probably the drive that the machine is booting off of first, which would be dev SDA right here. And you can see that we have partitions here. Here's the system. This is the system. And then there's a logical partition here that has a swap space for the virtual machine. Now, we don't want to do anything to this drive. We want to be very careful, because if we would change anything about these partitions, well, we could trash the whole system. What we're going to be interested in is this drive, which is the one we just created. Now, since this is a virtual drive and I just created it, it's totally blank. There's nothing on it. We're starting from scratch. This would be like you went out to the big box store and picked up a hard drive, or ordered one online and it showed up and you took it out of the box and put it in the machine. It's never had anything on it. If you are going to be recycling a drive, there's a couple of things to keep in mind here. So if the drive came out of a Windows machine, it's going to be formatted with NTFS. You may be tempted to leave it at NTFS and then just go ahead and mount it into your system and use that as a data drive. Don't do it, because NTFS has a habit of breaking itself. And if you are not running NTFS in a Windows system that has the check disk utility that fixes those problems, then your data may become corrupted over time using it on a Linux system. Also, NTFS does not provide the right permissions for files. The way Linux reads and writes NTFS is it essentially ignores those permissions completely. So in that case, it probably would be a better idea to go ahead and reformat that disk, and then you could turn it into something that would be native to Linux, which is what we're going to do today. The next thing to consider is if you are using a disk that was used in a Linux system and you are now going to repurpose that disk to make it a data drive in this system. What you may end up with is a situation where you will have to turn swap off. So let's go back to the system drive here, and you will see that we have a swap partition right here. What the live system will do is when it boots up, it scans for disks that have swap space. And if there's swap space available, it goes ahead and puts its own swap on that swap space. If you were trying to work with that disk, like reformat it, or you were going to change the partitions, the system wouldn't like that. It wouldn't allow you to do it. So what you do is just click on the swap partition in gparted and then choose swap off. Now that is off, and if we wanted to reformat this particular drive, we could, but we're not, because this is our system drive. I'm just doing that to show you what the deal is. If the live system puts its swap space virtual memory on the system drive, that's no problem, because ordinarily we wouldn't be messing with it anyway. So the first thing that we need to do is create a new partition. If there's already stuff on here, still create a new partition. Start over so that we start with a clean slate. And we will create a partition table. And in this case, it's prompting us that the partition table will be MS-DOS. We're going to stick with that for this video. If it was a particularly large drive and you were going to put a lot of little partitions on it, then you might want to use GPT, which doesn't have the restrictions of MS-DOS. The MS-DOS partitioning system will allow you to create 3 primary partitions, and then you have to create a logical partition, and within those logical partitions you can create logical volumes, so you can have more partitions. But GPT doesn't bother with that, and it supports bigger drives. So in this case, we have a pretty small drive, so we don't have to worry about that. Anything under 2 terabytes, MS-DOS will work just fine. So we'll go ahead and create that. So now we have created that, and we need to put some partitions on here. So let's do new. And in this case, for the purpose of this video, I'm actually going to put 2 on here. So let's just kind of split the drive down the middle a little bit. And we're going to create the first partition, which is going to be primary. And we are going to call this partition music. We want to use the ext4 file system that is native to most Linux distributions, especially if you're working with an Ubuntu-based distribution or Arch Linux. This is what you want to be using for sure, is ext4. We want it to be a primary partition. We'll go ahead and add it. So that's the first one. Then click over here on this free space. We're going to do another one. And then this will be the rest of the disk right here. Primary once again, ext4, yes. And then we're going to call this one just data. Just data. We're going to give that the name data. So what we now have is a disk with two partitions on it. One of them is called music and one of them is called data. Now, gparted hasn't actually done anything yet, which is really cool. So if you change your mind at this point, you want to go back and change the size of the partitions, you want to start over, or you say, I'm not going to use this drive, I'm going to use this other drive. Whatever the deal is, you can stop here. You have to apply the changes to make gparted actually do the changes to the disk. And it's going to warn you that if it does this, it blow out any data on the disk. We started with a clean disk, so this is not an issue, but we'll click apply. Now it's created the partitions, and this disk is actually done. So now we can go ahead and shut down the virtual machine so we can work with this in the operating system and figure out what we're going to do with it. So let's go ahead and we'll just restart and wait a couple seconds here. A lot of times in a virtual environment like this, when you restart a live environment, it'll just crash. Now this doesn't happen with hardware very often, but it does happen in VirtualBox, and I think that's exactly what's happened here because nothing's going on. So let me see, is the drive spinning? No, it's not doing anything. So let's go ahead and just close this. And we'll just power off the machine. It's not going to hurt anything at all for us to do that. Okay, so we'll go back here and we'll check to see that it removed the boot device. Yeah, it did. We wanted to make sure that there wasn't a boot device in the virtual DVD, or it would have booted back into that. So we want to boot into the native operating system that's already on the computer, and here we go. All right. Go ahead and log in. And we're at the desktop. Now we're going to have to work with our new drive a little bit to get it useful. So if I open up the home directory here, you now see that we have two new entries under devices. And get that out. We can go ahead and make this full screen too. It'll make it a little bit easier to work with. And you guys can see what's going on a little better. So now we have one called data and we have one called music. And if we click on it, we can get into that. But look, we have a problem. We can't create any files or folders here. So what good does this do? Well, what we need to do at this point is to give ourselves permission to actually use the drive. When we created this drive, we did it with root user privileges. So all of this now is owned by the root user, and it's not giving us permission to create files in here on either partition. So we're going to have to change that so we can actually get some use out of it. And to do that, it's actually really easy. So what we're going to do is alternate an F2, which allows us to run a command. And the command that we're going to use in Linux Mint is gk sudo, and then the file manager, which is Nemo. If you are running Ubuntu with another desktop, your file manager might be Nautilus, it could be Kaha, it could be Thunar, it could be many others to choose from. If you're running KDE, then it's Dolphin. But in this case, it's Nemo. So hopefully you know what file manager you're running. And now it's going to ask for permission. I'm going to tell it yes. So what we have here is we have a root file manager, which means that we have access to everything on this system. And not only that, we will be able to modify anything on the system. So this is cool, but it's also a bit dangerous. Make sure that you know exactly what you're doing before you proceed. You could very easily blow out system files here. And we're going to go to, we're going to find our drives. And right now the only one showing is music, so I need to unmount it from here. Oh, wait, so it is mounted, so let's go ahead and unmount that for now. And well, I'll go ahead and mount them both up because we're going to have to do this to both of them. So go down here, mount data, mount music. And we did that in a regular, this is a regular file manager. Just make sure you have them mounted up to the system. That's the point. Now, click on music, right click, and you notice now we can create files here because we're running as the root user. Go to properties, go to permissions, and for music we're going to do something a little bit different than just giving ourselves permission. We're actually going to change the owner. So go up here to owner and then scroll through the list. There's going to be a bunch of people up here and groups and whatnot. Just find yours. Just find you. And there I am right there. So this is going to be my drive, nobody else's. And I am going to change the ownership of that drive. Now for data, we're going to do something a little bit different here. We're going to go to properties, go to permissions, and now we're going to leave this as root, and we're just going to make it so that other people on the system can create and delete files. Okay, because this particular partition is going to be available to everyone. So go ahead and close. And then we will close our root file manager, unmount that. Now, what we should have is when we remount these, we should have complete permission. So there they are. Let's see if we can get into data and create something. Yes, we can create a new file or a new folder. So we'll create that. And then within that, let's just create a file just so we have something to look at. I don't have any templates set up on this machine, so just an empty document. And the same thing goes for music. Now, you can leave this just exactly the way it is, and what will happen is that anybody who logs into the system will have access to these, and then they can click on them and mount them and unmount them if they choose to. The only problem with doing this is that if you have a program, like for instance on the music drive, if you have a program that is going to be looking for music there and it's not mounted up, you'll launch your program and then it'll go, I can't find anything. So what we now have to do is we can tell the system, hey, I want this to be available all the time. And you don't have to do that. I mean, if this is just a drive that you're going to drag files to and store things on, and maybe some other people are going to do the same thing, then that's fine. You can just leave it the way it is, and you can mount it by hand and then unmount it. But most folks out there will probably put things like music and video and other media stuff and stuff they want to get to with a program. So it's better to have that mounted when the system boots up. So we're going to do that right now, and now is the time when we have to get into the terminal a little bit, because it goes back to the nature of the way that Linux handles block storage devices, and we got to get some information. So we're going to open up a terminal, and the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to run a command called blockid, sudo blkid, okay, blockid. Now what this is going to do is it's going to give us the universal unique identifiers for all of the storage devices on the system. And we're going to have those so we can make them mount automatically. So we have music, we have data, and these are the UUIDs right here. See those? So we'll just leave that where it is right now. You can just leave that terminal open. and we'll kind of put it to the side a little bit. And then we're going to use alternate F2 to make it so that we can open up a text editor, and we're going to open it up with root privileges, just like we did the file manager. And in Linux Mint, the graphic text editor is called Xed. So let's go ahead and do that. So we're going to do gk sudo, make sure I type that in correctly, gk sudo xed. It's going to ask for a password again, so we can give it root privileges. And now we have a root text editor running on the system right here. So the first thing that we need to do is we need to find a file called fstab. So go to open, and we are going to want to get into the file system. So go to other locations, go to computer, and we are looking for a directory called etc. etc. Where do you hide? There it is. It's listing it in reverse for some reason. All right, so there's a file in here called fstab. So we need to find that. Actually, you can just type fs and it'll go straight to it. So there is our fstab file, and we will open that up. Yes, and this is what it looks like now. What this file does is it tells Linux what to do with the storage devices you have on the system. It tells them where to mount them within the master file system. So the file system on a Linux machine always starts out with a slash, and then you can mount other storage devices anywhere within that system. So it's an endless, there's endless opportunity to mount things. You can have different drives in different places. You can also have network connections that show up as just drives. And as far as the end user is concerned, it's just another directory or folder on the system. And that's what this does. So the first thing that we need to do before we start messing around with this is we're going to have to save a backup copy, because just add back on here to make a backup. If we mess this up and the system does not boot, we want to be able to get back to where we started from. Now, how would you fix it if it didn't boot or something was wrong? Well, the best way to do it is to boot off a live disk again, and then open up a root file manager, navigate to this file on the system that you're booting from, and then just copy fstab back to fstab, restart the system, and everything should be hunky-dory. Okay. All right, so that's the first thing that we needed to do. Now we need to add our devices and tell the system where to mount them. So the first one we're going to do is music. Now, before we do that, we're going to have to do a little prep. So we're going to take a little detour here so I can show you how to do this properly. And that is open a file manager. Now, we're going to assume that if this were a machine that you were using, here's your music folder, okay? There's nothing in it right now, so I'm just going to create an empty document, and I'm going to call it song, just so that we have something to work with, all right? Now, you would have all of your music in here, and let's say that you wanted to put all of your music on that external storage device. Well, the first thing that you need to do is kind of move it out of here so that we can make the music folder an empty one. So create new folder, and we're going to call this one Music 2. That's just a temporary folder we're going to have here for a while. So we'll open up this folder, and then we're going to use the nifty split screen feature in Nemo. You can also just open up another one if your file manager doesn't do this. And then I'm going to go back to home here, and I'm going to go back to, I'm going to open up Music 2 there. So we have Music 2 here and the original music here. And now I'm just going to drag that over. And this is what you would do with your music collection. Just put it over there, right there. All right. So we've done that. We're good to go. Okay, so we can go ahead and close that up. Now we can pick up where we left off here. So go to Music. And then we have the UUID. We need to copy this, just like so. And I'm going to do it the more traditional way. I know some of you Linux folks are watching this going, you could have just middle clicked. I know. The video's for newbies, guys. We're just introducing concepts. So we come down to the bottom of the file. We're going to start a new line here. And we'll type in UUID. And we're going to have the UUID equal that number we just copied. Make sure you get the right one now. That's why we put labels on the partitions. The next thing we're going to do is tell it where to mount. So where's it going to mount? We need it to be in Home. And we're going to put it in Joe. And we're going to put it in Music. All right. Go ahead and just tab here. It's not going to line up perfectly on this example, but it'll be fine. And then we need to tell it what kind of file system the device has. Remember, we made it ext4. That's good. And then we just tab over once again. All you need to do is create spaces. I know there's different spaces between these things here, but really it's just looking for a space. So you can just tab once and it works just fine. So the next thing we do is need to tell the system what rules to use for this particular system and a file system. And we're going to use defaults. Make sure I spelled that correctly. That's fine. Defaults is a standard set of rules that works just fine in these situations. Okay, and then you see these two things here. It says dump and pass. And for the dump, that has to do with something that the deep system backup stuff. We're going to leave that to 0, which means just leave it alone. Don't mess with it. And then we're going to tab over once again. And now we're going to add the pass. Since this is ext4, wouldn't it be nice if the system checked it at boot up to make sure the drive was okay before it mounted it? Well, we want it to do that, but we want it to do it after it does the drive that has the entire operating system on it. So that's going to be pass 1, and anything after that will be pass 2. So we just did that. So there's our first drive, and it should be ready to go. Now remember, we have 2 partitions. So what we're going to need to do is figure out a place to mount our data partition. Now, a lot of folks will tell you to put it in the media folder, but what happens is with that is that you're going to have a mounted device on your desktop all the time, which is really kind of a, bummer. So what you want to do is you want to figure out a place for this to go. So once again, we'll do gk sudo, and this time around we'll open up Nemo, which is the file manager again. So now we're back to having a root file manager. Go to File System. Now be very careful here. You don't want to accidentally modify something that's already here, like your bin folder or etc or something like that. Okay. We just want to create a new directory. And we're going to create a new one here. And we're just going to be real creative and call it data. Okay, so we've created that new directory in there. Go ahead and close that. So now we have a place to stick our data drive. So let's get our UUID for that. And we will copy. And we'll create a new line. Paste in that number. And put a space here, and we're going to mount this one at data. All right, just tab over one a couple times there to give us some space. Need to tell it what the file system is. In this case, it's going to be ext4. Set our rules. Once again, it's defaults. Set the dump to 0 and set the pass to 2. All right, so now we need to save this. Now don't save it as, don't make the mistake of now just hitting the save button and then blowing out your backup, okay? Actually go over here and we'll do save as, And then all we got to do is take this BAK and dot off the end. And click Save. And now we have modified our FS tab file. Yeah, it already exists. Please replace. Done. Okay, so you can just reboot the system to see if it works, but what I'm going to do is cheat a little bit and use this open terminal to run a command that will do the same thing. So sudo mount A, which basically I'm telling the system, hey, read FS tab and mount anything up that's there. Well, it did it. You know how I know it did it? I got no output. If I get no output, I have no errors. Now, you don't have to use that command. This is not mandatory. You can just reboot the system. So let's go ahead and check and see what we've got going on here. Okay, so now in our home folder, we should have lots of space in our music. And we can see that we've mounted the new drive because we'll have space left. See? There you go. Yep, it's working. It's done what it's supposed to do. So we can open up Music 2. And we'll split this again. And let's see, go to Home. And now I'm going to drag all of my music that I want to be on that drive over onto it. And you notice it didn't disappear here. That's because if you're dragging from one partition to the next, it's not going to delete it. You're not moving it, you're copying it. So if I open this up, now you see that that's there, and it's also over here. So you can verify that now, all right, that's great. I've got this where I need it to be. Go ahead and turn that off. We'll go back to Home. And now we can just remove this folder that we created to temporarily store our music. Delete. Okay, so what about the data partition that we did before? Where is that in the system? Okay, go ahead. That's not going to unmount. See, we can't do that because it is mounted when the system boots up. If you want to unmount it, you're going to have to put in root privileges. All right, what about that data partition we were talking about? Where is it? Well, that partition is going to be in the file system, and it's going to be under data. So there it is. And there's the folder that we created when we started, and we do have access to that, and we can delete. Yep. So there you go. Now, if it is unwieldy for you to navigate to that data folder, which might be the case, then there's something that we can do to make that really easy. Go to My Computer here, and we'll go to Home. And once again, I'm going to use this split thing. Now, if your file manager doesn't do that, just open up another one. And so we're going to open up the file system here. Well, over here, that's fine. And now I'm going to take this and I'm going to center click on it. I'm center clicking, which means that in my case I'm using the button that goes along with the scroll wheel on the mouse. You can also click the right and left buttons simultaneously, and I'm dragging. And now it's going to give me the ability to link it here. So go ahead and create a link. And so now you have a link to that drive there. Now this is a system folder that appears on anything that's mounted to the system which you don't have access to. Okay, so don't worry about it. This is just a system folder called Lost and Found, and it's part of that thing that we set up when the system boots up. It will scan the drive with FSCK and make sure it's okay. So what it's going to do with that is that if it finds any file fragments that it can't figure out, it'll stick them in there, but that is like very rare, and if it does happen, the file system's probably trashed anyway. Never had the system actually do it, but that's what Lost and Found is about. So just don't worry about that. And you see that it's telling us that this is locked and we can't get to it. And let's see, let's go into music. I don't think we'll have a lost and found in there, but there you go. Might show up after you reboot the system. So there you go. We have added a drive, we have created partitions, and we have added tons of storage space to our system. And we have also set it up so that we have restricted access to the music just to us. And we've also made it so any other user can actually get into this data partition here. So we're good to go. Alright gang, that's pretty much it for this video. I hope it helps. I hope it wasn't confusing. And just to let you know, yes, you can do everything that I just did by actually just opening up a terminal and typing in commands. Matter of fact, for me these days, if I'm going to do work like this, that's how I do it. And before I close out the video, I think I'll just restart this machine and make sure that it mounts up the way it's supposed to. I know it will, but we're just going to make sure that it's working the way it should. Also give us something to look at on the screen while I give you my final thoughts. This is actually, I realize that if you're used to like Windows where you just plug a drive in and it shows up with another letter, that this is a little bit daunting at first, but once you realize what it's doing and how robust it is to be able to specifically tell the system where to mount storage, and it's going to be like that every time, then you kind of get to the point where you see, okay, this is cool, this is going to work every time that I boot up the machine, and it's going to be predictable. Now, it's showing music on here because we mounted this particular partition inside our folder. How do you get rid of that if you want to? Well, the best way to do it in Linux Mint is just to do this. So we go into settings. I personally wouldn't mind having that there. It's not that big a deal to me. But we'll go to settings, and then we'll go to desktop. And this applies to other distros as well. You'll just have to find the settings for this. Where is desktop? It's in here somewhere. Well, I can get to it this way too. Let me just go here and go to desktop settings. I wasn't seeing that. It's probably right in front of my face. You know how that is. Things tend to disappear. Okay, so right here, you can have it where it does not show mounted volumes on the desktop. Poof, that goes away. Of course, the only bad thing about that is that if you plug a USB stick into the system and then it automatically mounts that up, then you won't see it, but you can always get to your devices from here. So whichever way you want to do that is perfectly fine. And that's it. Thanks for watching the vid, gang. I do appreciate it. Check out freedompenguin.com for lots of really cool stories about Linux. Check out Easy Linux on the web. Made a lot of changes to the page. And also check out Easy Linux on Facebook if you happen to be a Facebook user. We're getting a lot of followers over there, and a lot of people are discovering Linux on Facebook. So all of you Facebook haters out there going, nah, that's the reason why it's there, because guess what? The non-Linux folks, they're on Facebook. So we're going where they are so we can get their attention. All right, gang, that's it. Talk to you again soon.